Breaking news from the front line. A single $500 FPV drone is now destroying $3 million main battle tanks. This brutal, asymmetrical cost gap has officially become the most lethal reality of the war in Ukraine. Our reports show heavy armor surviving artillery barrages and minefields, built specifically to withstand direct kinetic strikes. Yet the moment aerial eyes lock on, the tactical situation escalates before the crew even realizes they are targeted. Operators do not need a head-on clash with heavy armor. They wait for the perfect window, pinpointing vital structural vulnerabilities, trapping the target in a relentless loop of strikes until its mobility, cover, and extraction options are totally wiped out. We are tracking FPV strikes from forward trenches to deep logistical networks, hitting fuel depots, warships, and rear headquarters, proving how unmanned systems can push active combat deep into enemy territory. So, what makes this relentless drone onslaught so devastating? How can off-the-shelf tech simultaneously paralyze heavy armor, fortified bunkers, and critical supply lines? And what happens when the sky is constantly watching, and any movement means instant death? Let us break down the combat footage right now. Tactical feeds confirm FPV drones are now Ukraine's primary multi-role asset, moving far beyond simple reconnaissance missions. Initially, military analysts dismissed them as minor pests, only useful for harassing exposed infantry or unarmored transport trucks. That assessment was a fatal mistake. Ukrainian forces are systematically hunting main battle tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, heavy personnel carriers, logistics trucks, and ground robots, bunkers, heavy weapon nests, and trenches. This single, versatile platform can pursue speeding armor, plunge directly into bunker slits, silence machine guns, or deliver the final blow to targets already crippled by artillery. The true danger of these aerial assets is not just the warhead, but their extreme tactical agility. These cheap platforms, built from hobby-grade electronics, are wiping out millions of dollars in equipment that takes months to replace. The economic calculus has shattered. While Moscow spends months refurbishing and deploying heavy armor, Ukrainian drone teams can liquidate that asset the second it enters the combat zone. This asymmetric pressure does not mean every launch succeeds, but it turns every minor Russian troop rotation into a suicide run. Now, the introduction of thermite-spewing drones has escalated the horror. Bypassing basic blast effects, these systems rain down molten metal to incinerate defensive tree lines, burn through camouflage nets, and flush out defenders. This completely neutralizes enemy cover, as Russian infantry relies heavily on forest strips and ruined buildings to survive direct visual contact. When thermite strikes from above, hidden positions quickly transform into blazing ovens, choking smoke, searing heat, and raging fire force soldiers into the open, exposing them to immediate follow-up artillery fire and hunter-killer drone teams. Traditional defensive structures are becoming completely obsolete. Trenches and reinforced basements once shielded troops from incoming horizontal fire. Today, FPV drones have rewritten the geometry of survival. These killers strike vertically, slipping into narrow gaps that are impossible for ground troops to defend. A stronghold facing the front is now completely vulnerable from the sky, and this tactical shift is fundamentally altering the human cost of the conflict. Our troops no longer have to advance under heavy fire with rifles, shoulder-fired rockets, or high-risk assault teams. Pilots can locate and destroy heavy threats from miles away, while our infantry stays in cover. Active combat is still incredibly lethal, but we are successfully shifting the highest risk from blood to expendable machines. However, as FPV drones dominate the airspace, heavy armor faces the ultimate test of how one cheap hit triggers a catastrophic chain reaction. Tactical data shows we do not need an instant catastrophic kill. Often, the primary objective is simply to halt the tank's momentum. A main battle tank relies on speed, armor, and heavy firepower. But those elements crumble if the crew cannot move. Once a drone shears a track or pierces the rear engine deck, disrupting the suspension and steering, that multi-million-dollar war machine loses its entire combat edge. This is why mobility kills are now the priority on the battlefield. Hitting a moving target is difficult, especially when it is deploying smoke screens and retreating fast toward covered tree lines. But a stalled tank is a sitting duck, trapped directly under the watchful eyes of our overhead reconnaissance. Every passing second gives our drone operators the time to analyze entry angles and coordinate the finishing strike. The era of the unstoppable armored spearhead is over. It is now just a static target waiting for the final blow. Once that target is immobilized, Ukrainian forces execute a layered, relentless squeeze. First, FPV drones strike again from the blind spots, while heavier bombers drop lethal payloads directly into open hatches, gaping wounds, or exposed engine decks. Heavy artillery quickly joins the hunt if coordinates are locked and the target value warrants it. This systematic execution matters because you do not need an instant, explosive kill to take a tank out of the war. If the machine cannot move, cannot be towed, and cannot be repaired under fire, it is already a total combat loss. This brutal playbook is actively shattering the historical supremacy of heavy armor. Russian armor is built specifically to shrug off frontal blows where shielding is thickest. FPV killer drones have completely rewritten that tactical math. These cheap pilots completely bypass that reinforced frontal plate. Instead, they hunt down fatal weak spots, targeting the thin roof, rear exhaust, engine bays, turret rings, or hatches abandoned in panic. Attacks rain down from vertical vectors legacy defensive systems were never engineered to counter. The result, we are witnessing a whole new era of armored warfare. Forget tank-on-tank duels. This is an aerial execution where the initial drone merely breaks a track, and the follow-up wave methodically tears the beast apart. Even with minor systems still running, the trapped crew faces a rapidly closing window of options. Staying buttoned up inside means waiting to be incinerated. Bailing out exposes them directly to shrapnel, sniper fire, or circling FPV hunters. Attempting to repair a thrown track under active aerial surveillance simply invites a swarm. Make no mistake, a stranded tank remains lethal. The turret can still rotate, the main gun can fire, and secondary weapons still menace advancing infantry. Yet without mobility, the lifespan of this beast shrinks to minutes. It cannot shift fire angles, nor can it retreat to the tree line. It is trapped in the open field or road once Ukrainian reconnaissance assets have locked down its coordinates. In skies ruled by drones, an immobilized armored vehicle is forced to fight entirely on the enemy terms. That is why the initial strike is critical. It might not trigger an immediate blinding fireball, but it initiates a terminal destruction cycle. A shattered track, a dead engine, or ruined suspension can turn a multi-million-dollar asset into target practice under open skies. Beyond this point, the question is not if Ukraine will strike again, but how long the doomed crew can hold out before the next warhead impacts. However, hunting heavy armor is just the opening phase of this war. Ukraine is now systematically targeting the life support systems keeping Russian forces alive logistics. Targeting supply chains has become a Tier 1 operational priority. One precise hit here paralyzes multiple forward assault units at once. Ammo trucks, fuel tankers, supply rigs, and localized depots, and tactical delivery robots are high-priority targets because they sustain the entire enemy offensive. They deliver artillery shells, diesel fuel, rations, critical drone batteries, and vital spare parts directly to battle-damaged units. Break these links, and the paralysis ripples across the entire theater. This is why targeting a simple truck can alter an entire operation. A shattered supply truck might not look as spectacular as an exploding tank, but that single vehicle carried the artillery rounds for an assault, the fuel to escape, or the rations to survive the night. Ukraine is not just burning enemy armor. They are systematically shattering the operational tempo of the entire Russian offensive, and fuel, it remains their most highly sensitive, vulnerable bottleneck. When a high-capacity fuel tanker goes up, the tactical loss extends far beyond one single vehicle. Tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, recovery assets, and supply columns all starve without that continuous flow of diesel. Slow the fuel supply, and maneuvers freeze, recovery missions stall, and frontline commanders are forced to cancel assaults because their armor cannot guarantee movement. Striking ammunition transports delivers an even more devastating shock, where a single direct hit triggers catastrophic secondary detonations that wipe out surrounding assets. A hit on a hidden depot vaporizes stockpiles that took weeks of dangerous transport to accumulate. Even when the blast is small, the operational damage is severe. Artillery batteries fall silent, infantry squads assault without fire support, and entire battalions sit paralyzed, waiting for new supply lines. In response, Russia is deploying small, unmanned ground vehicles to run logistics through highly contested kill zones. The strategy is obvious when drone swarms and pre-sighted artillery cover every road. Machines must take the fall for men. These bots haul heavy ammo, fresh water, batteries, and medical supplies through exposed corridors, where manned transports would be easily destroyed. Yet, these automated lifelines are also being relentlessly hunted down. We are tracking reports of Ukrainian drone teams striking transport robots where the loss far exceeds the machine. We are talking vaporized ammunition, failed deliveries, and frontline troops left completely empty-handed under intense fire. The strategic message is clear. Moscow wants to shield personnel using unmanned systems, but Ukraine is systematically neutralizing the supply runs anyway. If we look closer, these drone strikes on logistics go far beyond destroying a single truck or supply depot. The objective is to choke ammunition flow, freeze troop rotations, and paralyze the staying power of hostile assault units. A combat unit starved of artillery shells simply cannot sustain their offensive momentum. Defensive positions deprived of basic water, medical supplies, and battery power rapidly become completely indefensible. Severed supply lines force longer, high-risk detours with lighter loads, crushing their combat readiness before the next offensive push even gets authorized. Hostile commanders will still order reckless assaults, but those pushes stall out fast when fuel runs dry, ammunition vanishes, and casualty evacuation corridors are completely compromised. Supply lines are rarely the flashiest part of this war, but as you and I know, they decide who holds the line. When supply columns are hunted from above, the element of time ceases to be a shield. The critical question is whether tactical vehicles can outrun death once Ukrainian drones are already locked onto their routes. Night cover once gave Russian troops a wider margin for maneuver. Vehicles shifted supplies, troops rotated positions, and evacuation teams rescued wounded soldiers with far less fear of aerial threats. That buffer is evaporating fast. Thermal imaging allows Ukrainian aerial drones to track heat signatures instead of relying on daylight cameras. A warm engine, a buzzing generator, or human body heat. Even a freshly fired weapon glows against the freezing background, completely redefining what darkness means on this battlefield. The night no longer conceals maneuvers because these drones are tracking heat, not just visible shapes and colors. They are reading thermal signatures, movement patterns, and footprints of troops trying to hide in the brush. This inflicts immense pressure during the exact hours once used to refit. Night operations offer absolutely no cover anymore. Small groups breaking cover are instantly detected by overhead assets. A disabled vehicle waiting for recovery glows bright on the monitor. The bottom line is simple: there are 0 safe hours left. Furthermore, Ukrainian command is moving far beyond deploying drones as isolated tactical assets. Reconnaissance aircraft, strike drones, ground robots, and naval vessels are now integrated into a single, unified kill web across all domains. One drone locates the target, another tracks it, a third strikes, while unmanned ground systems handle logistical transport. They clear minefields or bait the enemy into exposing positions, presenting a deadly, multi-tiered dilemma rather than a simple strike. A surveillance drone monitors a highway to detect movement. Then an explosive attack drone strikes the moment they enter a choke point. Later, a heavy bomber drone sweeps in to eliminate salvage teams trying to recover the damaged hardware. Unmanned ground systems minimize risk for Ukrainian infantry, all while aerial platforms keep the entire sector under constant watch. The true paradigm shift is not the sheer volume of systems airborne. It is the tactical division of labor. Every robotic asset has a specific mandate, feeding into an unrelenting, automated cycle of pressure. When this operational loop closes, Russian troops face massive, multi-directional threats simultaneously. They are targeted from above, hit at point-blank range, and struck again before they can even reorganize. This integrated approach is highly lethal near waterways, ports, and naval vessels, where flying drones scan exposed decks and defensive structures. These assets track personnel and hardware, while kamikaze sea drones execute coordinated strikes from the waterline. This level of coordination proves that modern robotic warfare has evolved far past a single operator flying a single kamikaze drone. It is rapidly transforming into a highly advanced multi-domain battle network, where air, land, and sea assets execute synchronized phases of a single mission. One element observes, another strikes, others transport supplies, effectively forcing the enemy to split their defensive focus. For Kyiv, this breaks the limits of time and space. Night is no longer a sanctuary, and sea lanes are fully integrated combat zones. High-value targets are tracked in absolute darkness, shadowed for miles, and hit from multiple vectors the moment they show vulnerability. But make no mistake, as Ukraine scales these unmanned arrays, the Russian military is forced to adapt to survive. Right now, the Kremlin is reacting to this pressure, but as we will see, adaptation is not control. On the ground, we are seeing improvised armor cages, heavy steel screens, and anti-drone netting. Intelligence reports Russian armor scrambling to deploy camo, makeshift jammers, and tactical EW gear across the line. Make no mistake, these frantic upgrades prove Moscow finally fears the incoming storm. With FPVs and recon UAVs blanketing the skies, every exposed crew must assume they are already targeted. These crude defenses are their last desperate bid to survive the impact. An armor cage forces the pilot to hunt for another vector. A mesh net might deflect a lethal dive directly into the hatch. Camo might buy them precious seconds. Signal jammers can sever control links, forcing drones into lower, high-risk trajectories. We cannot dismiss these Russian countermeasures. They do save lives. They actively degrade strike accuracy, stalling rookie drone pilots or buying time in sectors where Ukrainian assets are stretched thin. But make no mistake, none of this creates an impenetrable shield. Major vulnerabilities remain. Upgraded armor still leaves massive blind spots near the engine deck and side plating. The rear bays, tracks, and open hatches are completely vulnerable. Cages shield the roof, but enclosing a vehicle entirely turns it into a heavy, sluggish, and unmaneuverable coffin. Camo keeps them invisible for only so long. Thermal signatures, sudden movement, fresh track marks, or routine logistics loops will inevitably betray their position to hunting eyes. Active EW suites face the exact same flaw. They disrupt signals, yes, but they are never a permanent fix. Ukrainian operators simply shift frequencies, adapt control schemes, fly low, or overwhelm defense grids with multi-drone swarm attacks. Or they hunt the EW source directly. Ironically, emitting high-powered jamming signals often screams to intelligence that a high-value asset is hiding right below. That defensive pulse instantly becomes a beacon for artillery. Meanwhile, Russia is shifting tactics, deploying drones for silent ambushes. Picture an FPV drone perched silently near a key supply route, acting as a remote-controlled mine. This shows the terrifying speed of adaptation on both sides, posing a severe threat to predictable Ukrainian supply columns. Yet, traps have limitations. Early detection allows infantry, concentrated small arms fire, local EW, or counter-recon drones to neutralize the threat before it detonates. A trap is only lethal if it remains unseen until impact. The overarching lesson? Russia can drive up the cost, complexity, and frustration of Ukrainian operations. But they cannot neutralize the threat. Every countermeasure sparks a lethal chess game. Drone pilots adapt. Infantry responds. EW squads recalibrate. And the meat grinder cycle repeats. This is why these defense grids make the airspace infinitely more complex, not safer. They might curb casualties temporarily, but they cannot stop Ukraine from pushing its kinetic pressure far past the zero line toward depots and supply routes. Staging zones and rear roads, once deemed secure deep inside occupied territory. This war has blown past the muddy trenches. Ukrainian forces are aggressively expanding deep strike operations, hitting major ports, fuel hubs, offshore platforms, radar arrays, warships, and critical logistics pipelines. This strategic pivot is vital. It scales up the operational pressure exponentially. A frontline strike disables a single tank or stalls an assault, but a blast at a major port, a fuel depot, or a naval base cripples transit, logistics, maintenance, and shatters high command confidence across the entire theater. Look at the Black Sea, the ultimate proof of this sweeping strategy. Constant strikes targeting the Black Sea Fleet, Novorossiysk harbor, offshore platforms, and energy pipelines prove drone fleets can paralyze zones far from active ground combat. They devastate high-value hardware. But more importantly, they shatter maritime corridors, incinerate strategic fuel reserves, halt shipping lanes, and erase any illusion of sanctuary in the rear. For Russian planners, focusing solely on the trench lines is no longer an option. Moscow is forced to adapt. They can retreat their fleet, screen vehicles, deploy advanced camouflage, or decentralize critical fuel reserves, pushing logistics hubs much deeper into sovereign territory. Yet, while these shifts mitigate direct strikes, they carry massive hidden operational costs. Extended supply lines bleed time and fuel. Scattered depots become a logistical nightmare. Concealed armor survives longer, but it takes drastically longer to deploy when a frontline crisis erupts. The brutal operational reality is that distance has lost its protective value. As range and guidance systems rapidly improve and integrate with advanced reconnaissance, the line separating a lethal front zone from a secure rear sanctuary is completely erased. A base sits hundreds of miles from active infantry, yet remains entirely vulnerable. A crucial repair yard sits in the rear, yet it instantly enters the kill chain once tracked, geolocated, and targeted. This transforms the theater into a hyper-monitored grid, where any movement carries lethal risk. A truck idling too long, an active radar signature, a warship moored at a static pier, or a depot repeating the same routine, all of them become targets. Stay alert, because the next strike is already inbound. At this very moment, we are looking at something far bigger than drones just picking off single targets. These unmanned systems are completely tearing up the rulebook, rewriting the entire battlefield from the muddy trenches straight to the supposedly secure supply depots deep behind the lines. Let us be clear. Drone combat in Ukraine has evolved far beyond isolated tactical strikes. It is dictating how entire armies move, hide, and try to survive under an eye that never blinks. FPV drones hunt heavy armor, while raining thermite strips away every last bit of cover. Thermal cameras strip away the protection of darkness, while unmanned surface vessels expand the threat to the seas, forcing Russia onto the defensive. Russia is adapting fast with intense jamming and massive camouflage, using heavy anti-drone nets, interceptors, and cheap, mass-produced unmanned swarms. These desperate stopgaps might buy them time, but they can never bring back the days when distance, darkness, or thick steel armor kept soldiers safe. On this brutal modern battlefield, the ultimate advantage belongs to whoever spots the enemy first, relays the target data instantly, and strikes with absolute precision. Forget asking how thick your tank's armor is. The only question that matters now is, how long can you survive before the sky spots you? If this briefing broke down today's brutal reality, please hit like and subscribe to Military Force. We break down these conflicts not to glorify violence, but to analyze the devastating human cost, the tech driving it, and the high-stakes decisions shaping our world. Understanding this nightmare is the only way we can truly fight for peace. Stay vigilant.